may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I want to give two big shout outs here. One to Hurricane Warning and the other one to Kyle, because we were having a conversation in the premiere for the video today, and they were just essentially saying, Mason, I don't care what you were saying about Joe Mixon right now. I mean, based on what he did to my fantasy team last year, I have no interest. I don't care if I miss the boat. We can pass on him here. He is just a bum that I want nothing to do with. And y'all know that what makes this channel so different from other fantasy football channels is it's not about me. It's about the conversation that we are having throughout the course of the videos, through us just kind of being able to grow together in fantasy football. So I am always the first person to say that, hey, I am wrong all the time. I mean, a lot of people watching these videos are significantly smarter than I am. And I don't think you hear that very much from other people making YouTube videos. And I really want to stress that there's a reason that we are the flock, and I am not the flock. I am just Mason, and we are all a part of this. So please, if you have not already, guys, make sure y'all are coming out to those premieres. Make sure you're continuing to have that fantasy football conversation with me, because it definitely makes me a better player. I mean, hearing your opinion and us actually having a real conversation changes my mind a lot of times, and it makes me try to reevaluate some stances that we have on players. So yeah, I just want to give a massive thank you for the guys that do come out to the premieres. That way we can talk as we watch the videos. And if you don't know how to go out to the premieres, literally just subscribe to the channel. Make sure you're dropping likes on videos, because I know the YouTube algorithm kind of gets a little funny when it does send you notifications if you're not actively liking the video. And also, the most important thing, hit that bell next to the subscribe button. Come out, talk some fantasy football. Now, of course, I talk fantasy football every single day throughout the entire day over there on Patreon, but I understand everybody's in a different scenario. Not everybody can join the Patreon flock and really be a part of that chat. So make sure you're joining the premiere chat, because anybody can do that. Now that's it. Let's dive into it, and let's talk Joe Mixon. Let's talk about some of these players that are just looking like they are going to be pretty good values in fantasy drafts in 2021, given the fact that they burned owners last year, given the fact that people really have no interest. But Joe Mixon right now, I don't want to say that people have no interest, because he is still going in a decent range in drafts. I mean, you do have him going in the middle of the second round consistently in those current best ball drafts for 2021. And here with Joe Mixon, I think that this is a completely fair price. He's actually one of my favorite targets in the second round based on the value that you are getting with the amount of touches he should see. Now, I know, guys, in 2020, he really let people down. In 2020, he was a late first-round pick. He actually had an ADP of 10 overall. And if you look at his per game numbers, they weren't too bad. I mean, he finished as a top 10 running back in points per game. He finished as the running back 9. Now, of course, you're not going to win your league by getting the running back 9 production from your first round pick. But nonetheless, I mean, it's not like he was some major bust. The problem with Joe Mixon was simply the injury. The problem was during week 6, he suffers a foot sprain. Then he does not play a single game the rest of the season. And I think this is so wrong to hold this against Joe Mixon. And I want to be the first person to admit, guys, that when we were in week 7 and week 8, I was saying, go buy Joe Mixon, go get him. People are looking at him in a poor light just because at the beginning of the season, they were not using him in the receiving game, but they changed that usage halfway through where Joe Mixon turned into a workhorse running back, and we were trying to buy the dip with the injury. And then Joe Burrow got hurt, and I completely stopped that train. I went, hey, you know what? Joe Burrow is hurt. This is a team that has literally no shot at making the playoffs, so I would be surprised if we see Joe Mixon coming back anytime soon. So yeah, Joe Mixon essentially gets shut down for the season. And I think it's very similar to what actually happened with Kenny Golladay, where these players that are studs that are dealing with lingering injuries. I mean, if you're on a team that has no shot at really doing anything that season, I think the best course of action the majority of the time is just to go through and say, hey, I'm done. I don't need to continue to put my body at risk. I mean, there's no reason for me to do so at this point. So Joe Mixon gets shut down, but the foot sprain, honestly, I would be surprised if we would have not had him back in week 12, 13, 14, if this team was on the brink of making a wild card spot, if Joe Burrow stayed healthy. So please don't think that this is an injury that should be lingering into 2021. I mean, he's going to be 100% healthy going into the season. And with Joe Mixon, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is the fact that this is a running back that, came out in 2017, but he is incredibly young. I mean, it is laughable how young Joe Mixon currently is. Now, he's going into his 5th season in the NFL, and y'all know I always say that with those running backs, once they get on their second contracts, that's when you're going to be looking for the fall off. That's when you're going to be trying to pump the brakes and not necessarily going all in, expecting their former production, because we know running backs hit that cliff very early on. But no, Joe Mixon, only 24 years old, going into his 5th year. This is only 1 year younger than Najee Harris, which is absolutely ridiculous. And obviously, you're not drafting him just off of his age. What you're drafting Joe Mixon for this year is the projected volume that he should see in Cincinnati. I mean, the volume is going to be through the roof. Now, if you look at what he had in 2020, it's a little bit misleading given the fact that a lot of it came in one game. A lot of that production came in the game just against Jacksonville. But I want to point out the fact that after that Jacksonville Jaguars game, actually during the Jags game and then thereon, I mean, Joe Mixon began to get usage in the receiving game. And this is something we talk about all the time. This is why we were saying that Joe Mixon was a buy low running back at the beginning of the season, because Joe Mixon was an elite receiving running back at OU. We have seen it before from Mixon that he is one of the best receiving running backs in the entire NFL. Now, early on in his NFL career, he didn't get the exact type of usage in the receiving game that you would want to see, because Giovanni Bernard was a more than capable pass catcher, because Giovanni Bernard is actually a far above average NFL receiving running back. So of course, when you have a guy that has that capability in obvious passing down situations, it does make sense to give Joe Mixon just a little bit of a breather. It does make sense to go, hey, you know what, Joe Mixon, we need you to be able to break some more tackles. We need you to make sure you are fresh on every single touch. I mean, Giovanni Bernard is great at this role anyway. Let's just sit it out. Regardless, we did see Zach Taylor change his mind with that halfway through the year. Joe Mixon began to be the receiving down running back there, where he bumps up his receptions per game up to 3.5, and he had 4.3 targets per game in 2020. Now, he also had 20 carries a game, but obviously you're never worried about the carry volume with Joe Mixon. Now, what I want to point out is the fact that Giovanni Bernard is gone. They do not replace him. This is definitely something that you have to look at, in that since Joe Mixon has been in Cincinnati, Giovanni Bernard has actually averaged 3.5 targets per game, which I know doesn't sound like a ton, but understanding that those snaps were going to Gio and those targets are so much more valuable than carries in fantasy football. I mean, those now are safely going to be going to Mixon, because we know Mixon has prototypical size for a running back. We know that he was also that elite receiving running back at OU. We have seen him be highly efficient with targets in the past at the NFL level. So yeah, I'm all in on Joe Mixon here. I mean, the volume should be through the roof. You look at the depth chart and you go, are they really going to be splitting a backfield with Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, or Travion Williams? No, that's not going to be happening at all, despite me having Travion Williams on some taxi squads and deep dynasty rosters. No, Joe Mixon is going to be a workhorse running back. He's going to be an Ezekiel Elliott type player in 2021. If you're getting that in the second round, because some people got burned on him last year, some people are going to be passing up just because they really don't want to have to deal with the injury situation again, please take that value. Chase volume. I promise you that's how you win fantasy leagues. That's the number one thing in fantasy football, is making sure you get those touches. Now, let's go over some other players, some guys that honestly, I don't want to be targeting this year. Let's go to Josh Jacobs. Now, Josh Jacobs was also being drafted at the end of the first round last year, and Jacobs finished as a high-end running back 2 in points per game at the running back 15 spot, but this was honestly surprising. I figured that he had a much worse season than he did, and in 2020, he had 18 carries a game, 3 targets a game, and 86 total yards. Now, I will point out that I'm going to be the first one to admit I did not expect to see him have 3 targets a game. That's more usage in the receiving game than I thought he had. But the main thing with Jacobs is the fact that we never saw him be that consistent receiving running back at Alabama, and we have yet to see it at the NFL level so far. And now they bring in Kenyon Drake with the largest running back contract of the offseason, despite already having Josh Jacobs on the roster. And now, of course, Aaron Jones got the bigger contract, but Aaron Jones stayed in Green Bay. Nonetheless, I mean, what I want to be pointing out here is the lack of usage in the receiving game. If we go back to 2019, Josh Jacobs was only able to average 2 targets a game. And all we heard in the offseason leading up to that 2020 year was, hey, Josh Jacobs is going to get usage in the receiving game. Josh Jacobs is going to be our guy in there on third downs. It simply didn't happen. We saw Jag running backs coming in and getting targets, taking away snaps from Josh Jacobs to a point where it definitely limits your overall ceiling, because we know when you're drafting a running back 1 or running back 2, the last thing you're doing is just chasing floor. I mean, you never want to be drafting someone going, hey, I know he's never going to be a top 8 running back, but I am at least trying to get someone that's going to be getting carries between the tackles, because we know you can find that way later on in drafts. You don't have to spend a premium pick on that. And I think you're going to be looking at Josh Jacobs as a player that has fallen down draft boards considerably, where he is currently going in the mid-4th round of most fantasy drafts. And I am not even willing to go and invest into him at that price, because we have seen in back-to-back seasons that he does not have access to that top 8 running back overall upside, given the fact that he is not going to get the receiving usage, given the fact that now they bring in Kenyon Drake, running back we were avoiding last year, but still, he has significantly more talent than a Jalen Richard. So, yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs, he burned anybody who drafted him last year, and I think that maybe his floor is about where you're drafting him, just a little bit lower. I mean, of course, if you draft Josh Jacobs, you're expecting him to be a guy that can get 14 carries a game at the minimum, but the targets aren't going to be there. And if the targets aren't there, you better be playing in one of the most efficient offenses in the entire NFL, one of the best offensive lines in front of you, like a Nick Chubb or like a Derrick Henry. And outside of that, you are not going to have access to elite top tier upside on a bad NFL offense with a subpar offensive line. Okay, so now let's go over to a guy that I whiffed on. And I have to admit, he was one of our top targets in fantasy drafts last year. And also, whenever he disappointed, I called him a buy low candidate, and it never worked out. Miles Sanders. Okay, so Miles Sanders currently is going in the middle of the 3rd round of fantasy drafts in 2021. You compare this to where he was going in 2020, where he had an ADP of 19 overall, so he was a mid-second. Now he is a mid-3rd. And honestly, I don't know if the fall is enough for Miles Sanders. Now, y'all know that this was my guy last year, but we're looking at a situation where I just simply think that he doesn't have access to that Joe Mixon type workload. Now, yes, he is only 24 years old, and in 2020, he was used in the running game as well as the receiving game with 15 carries and 4.33 targets a game, and he had a total of 88 yards a game. But the problem here with Miles Sanders is what the team shows us this offseason. The team goes out of their way to draft Kenneth Gainwell in the 5th round. Then after drafting Kenneth Gainwell in the 5th, they go and they sign Kerryon Johnson. Now, no, I do not expect either running back to be playing ahead of Miles Sanders. No, I do not think either of them's close to Miles Sanders with his talent profile. But what this is showing us is it's showing us that the Philadelphia Eagles are not prepared to use Miles Sanders as a 3-down running back. And on top of this, we know that now with Jalen Hurts coming in, Jalen Hurts is going to be a quarterback that you should not expect to be consistently dumping the ball off to the running back out of the backfield. So that is going to limit the receiving upside for Miles Sanders. So yeah, I mean, he was disappointing last year. He disappointed pretty much everybody in the flock just because I was so wrong in advocating for people to go and chase him. And I think anybody chasing him now at a quote-unquote discount, they're going to be disappointed. Don't chase the Josh Jacobs. Don't chase the Miles Sanders at a discount. I mean, there are much better players to go and get, and we're going to be covering them right now. Actually, let's talk about Juju-Smith Schuster first. Another guy, just because we just discussed Miles Sanders, let's talk about another player that we were targeting over and over and over again, Juju. And here with Juju, yeah, very young, only 24 years old. He is currently going in about the 7th round of fantasy drafts this year. And clearly, I mean, this is a much worse situation than what we had last year, given the fact that they bring in a running back that you presume that they want to turn into a little bit more of a neutral team in terms of their pass to run ratio. Also, they go add a tight end. They bring back Eric Ebron. Chase Claypool's taking that natural jump in year 2, which we did not expect Chase Claypool to be the kind of talent that he is. So Juju is in a place that the efficiency shouldn't necessarily be sky high, because it looks like Ben Roethlisberger has taken a hit to his arm talent, and he's on a depth chart where there are so many other pieces around him. Now in 2020, he was actually going at the very end of the 3rd, sometimes the beginning of the 4th, and I was calling him the best value in fantasy drafts, and I was just flat out wrong here, as he finishes as a low-end wide receiver 2, a wide receiver 24 in points per game. So it's not like you didn't get anything from Juju-Smith Schuster, but he definitely did not live up to expectations last year. He only had 6 receptions a game, 52 receiving yards a game. And really what saved us kind of is the fact that he was able to get 7-8 touchdowns in a disappointing season. We know touchdowns are also a little bit more volatile than everything else you're seeing. So that's not even something that you can predict going forward, especially given the fact that they have Claypool and Najee Harris on this team. Now, this is just a free fall for Juju as well. I mean, you go to 2019 and you see that he was being drafted at the top of the 2nd round. And you go, okay, Juju falling all the way to the 7th here. And very similar to Miles Sanders, very similar to Josh Jacobs. While I really want to tell you to go draft Juju at a discount, I can't. And I think we are just going to be going, we can't avoid him, but we're going to be neutral on him. I mean, if he falls past his ADP, sure, we'll take a look at grabbing him, but I'm not going to be jumping up and down to get him in the 7th. Okay, so now our last player is someone that I am going to be jumping up and down to get. This is going to be Michael Thomas. Okay, so Michael Thomas going higher than Juju. He's going in the middle of the 3rd round currently, but he may be the best wide receiver value in all of fantasy football currently. Obviously, Jameis Winston coming in for the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints. And I will say this isn't even a bad thing for Michael Thomas. I mean, we saw Jameis Winston provide wide receiver 1 seasons for both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at the same time in 2019. And Michael Thomas in this New Orleans Saints team, I mean, there is no significant wide receiver 2 to play across from him. This is a completely different situation where we have seen Michael Thomas before handle an elite target share. I mean, a target share that literally should never even happen. I mean, we go back to 2019, he was the wide receiver 1 in all of fantasy football in points per game at 24.5 points per game. And the next best was Chris Godwin with Jameis Winston at under 20. So Michael Thomas was just a clear tier ahead of everybody else in fantasy. And now, I mean, he is just seeing a massive fall based on his 2020 performance. Now, in 2020, he had an ADP in the middle of the 1st round as the first wide receiver off the board. And obviously, he deals with some injuries. He gets the high ankle sprain. He has to leave halfway through week 1. And then you look at the weeks that he did play, I mean, weeks 9 through 14, he actually was the wide receiver 33 in points per game. But clearly, we can say that he was not healthy. He wasn't close to being 100% because there is no way that someone can say with a straight face that Michael Thomas went from being the bona fide wide receiver 1 in all of football to being a low-end wide receiver 3 with no health concerns at all. I mean, that simply doesn't make sense. So now you're seeing him go in the middle of the 3rd round, and I think Michael Thomas is probably closer to that mid wide receiver 1 than he is anywhere close to that wide receiver 3. So Michael Thomas, if you can come away with him after you say draft a guy like, let's say in the 1st round, you end up getting an Alvin Kamara, then in the 2nd, you get a Joe Mixon, in the 3rd, you get a Michael Thomas. I mean, I don't know if there's a better start in all of drafts in 2021. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. I really owe a massive thank you for all the Patreon supporters in Ben, Braden, Zach, Ryan, William, Derek, Justin, Marshall, Tyler, and Eamon. Thank you so much, guys.